Well, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Bill Powers. I'm the president at UT Austin, and it's a great pleasure for me to be able to welcome you to the lunch this afternoon. And it is always a great pleasure for me to come to these TAMEST meetings. I've been doing it for several years. I'm not a member, of course. I'm not a scientist. I was a chemistry major in college, but then made a wrong turn somewhere. But it is a great pleasure for me to come to these TAMEST meetings. One reason, the presentations are just terrific. Finding out what is on the cutting edge of many of these fields and listening to the great talent that we have at our universities in this state. It's a great pleasure because it is always a thrill to be among such distinguished people. People that are at the top of their fields, not just in the state, but nationally and internationally. What the Greeks called arete, that is talent and skill at whatever people are doing. That's always a thrill. But the other thing, in addition to all of that, as an organization, Dr. Brown this morning talked a little bit about the starting of TAMEST. Many people in this room were involved in the starting of TAMEST. Who would have thought in 8 short years what this organization has grown into? So as we start lunch, I just want to say, as somebody who's not a scientist now, but a Texan and a member of the Texas academic community, thank you for what you do for science, for our state, for our medical schools, for our universities. And to TAMEST, thank you for what you've become to be such a force for good for our country and our state. I'll be back when we get to dessert, and we'll have a program and our keynote speaker, but in the meantime, enjoy your lunch. Thank you. Giving heartfelt thanks to our sponsors of TAMEST, sponsors of this program. Their names have been on the screen during the lunch and are displayed elsewhere during the conference. I won't go through all of them individually, but I do think we need to recognize them, not just for their financial support for TAMEST and for this program, that is critically important, but also for their vision and insight that STEM subjects in K-16 education in our state are so vitally important. So I think many of them are here with us today, not all of them, but many of them. And so I think we should show our appreciation with a round of applause for our sponsors. You know, as Dr. Figueroa, our chancellor, recognized this morning in his tribute, TAMEST and UT Austin and the scientific community, nanoscience, suffered a terrible loss when we lost Paul Barbara this year. It was a terrible loss, as I say, for TAMEST, certainly for our campus at UT Austin, for people in this room, where it leaves a personal hole in our lives. I am delighted that Sharon Barbara is here at the conference here with us today. Sharon, God bless you. Also, I'm so pleased that members of Paul Barbara's research group are here, affectionately known as the Barbarians. Could you stand? I know you're here. I don't know at which table. Could you all stand and let us thank you for carrying on Paul Barbara's legacy. And now to introduce our keynote speaker, the president of UT Dallas, David Daniel, a great friend of mine, a colleague president in our system, a great member and servant to TAMEST since 2000, a member of the National Academy of Engineering. Served on the TAMEST board from 2007 to 2010. Served as the president of TAMEST in 2009. And David, we're all proud of you as a great engineer and part of the scientific community. Let me say, our campus at UT Austin, we're very proud of you. A bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD in engineering, and a member of our faculty from 1980 to 1996. Please welcome President David Daniel.
They taught me how to do everything but climb stairs. Well, thank you all. And before I introduce our speaker, I just, on behalf of all of TAMEST, want to express our appreciation to you, Bill, and to your predecessor, Larry Faulkner, and to everyone at UT Austin for your support of TAMEST. You've given us office space, help us get things done, and we've always known you've been there to support us, and we greatly, greatly appreciate that. Our keynote speaker today is Mr. Rich Templeton, the Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Texas Instruments. Mr. Templeton earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from Union College in New York and began almost immediately thereafter with Texas Instruments and was to rise over the next 30 years from an entry-level engineer to President, Chairman, and CEO of the company. So for the barbarians, let this show you what can happen if you work half as hard as Mr. Templeton has worked. Rich has been past president of the Semiconductor group within Texas Instruments, held every major leadership role within the company on his ultimate quest to lead the company. And you have biographical information in the materials for the conference, so maybe I'll tell you a couple things that are not in those biographical materials. One is that Mr. Templeton is, as far as I'm concerned, an icon of appreciation for research, discovery, and innovation. He's created something called the Kilby Labs, and Rich, I hope you'll say something about that, and an innovative spirit within his company that is truly unique. This is a company that truly values discovery, science, and engineering, and lives it and breathes it every day, and actually I think has some best practices to share with the rest of us. The other thing about Mr. Templeton, in addition to being an absolutely brilliant businessman who's put his engineering learned principles to work in a disciplined approach to running the company, is his great appreciation for education and students. And in fact, TI is one of the great supporters across the nation in supporting science and math education. But Mr. Templeton himself actually takes time to visit universities across the U.S. He spends a whole day typically on these journeys, loves to sit down and chat with students, and I think just truly enjoys being part of that whole experience. So not only is it part of the culture, if you will, at Texas Instruments, but also part of his own personal culture. He's been named the leading CEO in the semiconductor industry for 3 consecutive years and has steered his company through some very rough waters, but I think it's because he understands that even when there's a downturn, that's an opportunity for the smart person, smart company that's driven by innovation. We're extremely honored to have as our keynote speaker today, Mr. Rich Templeton. Please welcome him to the podium.
David, thank you very much. As David explained, I was born in New York, but I did get to Texas as soon as I could, and haven't returned yet. But it's really an honor and quite humbling to be with such an important and esteemed group of people here today, and to talk about a subject that's not just important to Texas Instruments, but important to me personally, because it's been really what has fascinated me about the semiconductor industry, why I've spent now 30 years in it, and that is that the whole secret behind prosperity, and that's prosperity for us in Texas, or that's prosperity for us in the United States, it's all about innovation. It's really that simple. groups, countries, states, companies, whatever boundary you want to put on it, those that innovate well are going to do well. And I think that's going to continue for quite some time. And so I want to spend a little bit of time today and talk about some of my beliefs about where we are. And very specifically, despite the amazing things that have happened over the past 100 years, I want to talk a little bit about, I think it is really a great time to be in this world. And I think we've got some great opportunities in front of us in terms of innovation that's ahead. I want to spend a little bit of time, and I want to talk about chips, or the chip industry. And we have a very biased view that they really are the foundation or the heart of innovation that's taken place throughout the globe. And we believe that's going to continue for many years to come. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about really a call to action. And that is, if people believe prosperity is linked to innovation, innovation is clearly linked to investment in R&D, and that's about great minds. And we've got to make sure we've got all that working together. I know that we're fortunate as a company, and that is that I get a chance to travel throughout the U.S. I talk to many of my peer leaders at different companies. I get a chance to travel throughout the world. We are fortunate that we are headquartered in the state of Texas. And I say that not just to play to the local crowd, but because if you take a look, we have a lot of like-minded behaviors that we all believe in across this state. And it begins with some really very simple things, like global markets are opportunities. They're not things to fear. Okay, those are customers and those are markets out there. Yeah, there happen to be competitors, but global markets are opportunities. The second idea, that we need to attract the best and brightest minds to be able to compete and win. Football, of course, is a huge sport in this state, and we understand you can either have the great players playing for you or against you, and the battle of innovation is no different. You can have the best minds on your teams, or those best minds will be competing against you. And then lastly, I think we have a culture and an environment as a state that really, call it entrepreneurial, call it whatever adjective you want to put on it. I think we have a place that believes in turning people loose to let them go compete, and let them go compete aggressively with a passion to try to change the world. Those are powerful things that I think all of us have got as an environment, be it research, be it as public officials or inside of industry. So let me start first with why I believe 2011, it's a new year, new decade, why I believe it is truly a great time in this world for innovation. And I make that comment because I think it's important that we remind ourselves as leaders of our institutions just where we are. And it is easy. If you are crazy enough to turn on cable news or pick up a newspaper or read the news on the web, one can get distracted by the headlines. It could be political gridlock, it could be recession, it could be how poorly the Cowboys have played this year. I won't bring it up, Bill, okay? But it's easy to get distracted by the headlines around the world today. But the fact is, innovation has as great an opportunity as ever. Now, some of you have probably heard this one. It's one of my favorites to try to frame people just a little bit on some of the thinking that we need to make sure we have. There was a quote made, and there's some debates about the attribution of the quote, but it was a quote of "Everything that can be invented has been invented." Who remembers what year that was said? 1899. 1899, it's all done. The important stuff has been invented. It was the head of the U.S. Patent and Trade Office at the time. Okay. Look at the century plus 10 years that we've seen since that quote. That's why there's debates about the attribution. The world that we know it, I don't care if it's transportation, energy, healthcare, technology, you would not recognize it if you went back 100 years. Equally powerful and equally regrettable forecast was made in the 50s when some great investigators with IBM looked out around the world and said the world needs 5 computers. Those smart guys. This wasn't just some flippant comment. 5 computers will be needed. I guess most people in this room have got 5 computers each. No, and it's going to go up. So I think the importance about thinking about the time that we're in is to look back at some of those statements. These were smart people. These were well-intentioned people. But typically, and that is the beauty about what I love about the world of innovation, the world about technology, is we vastly underestimate the impact innovation has in society around us. We just vastly underestimate it at the time it is taking place. Jack Kilby had said for many years, the inventor of the integrated circuit, okay, that for 15 years, he did not appreciate, and the world didn't really appreciate just the impact that the integrated circuit would have, because it takes time for the true impact to roll out. Look at the world around us today. Society is literally asking for breakthrough solutions. Think about energy or electricity. Think about the smart grid and metering. Think about the electric networks in society today. And if there's a storm coming in to any of the utility areas, be it in Texas, California, anywhere, there's a storm coming in, what do the utilities do to prepare to isolate where those problems are going to be? They put people in trucks, they send vans out, have them positioned, and they wait for the phones to ring. There's an outage, they then send people to fix it. If your IT administrator showed up in your office and told you that the way he was going to run your computer network was to station people throughout the building, and when there's an outage, yell, you'd laugh. You would laugh. Technology that we've got today is going to allow electric delivery, electric grid, smart metering to be done in ways that were never imagined before. Think of things like lighting inside our home. Incandescent bulb, over 100 years ago developed. 5% or 6-7% of the energy that goes into that incandescent bulb turns into lumens. 93% of it turns into heat. So you can turn a motor to run the air conditioning to get the heat out of the house. Solid state lighting, LED lighting, probably can take this up to 50% efficiency from 5. Powerful, powerful impact. Motors can turn more efficient. Think of the world of making cars safer. If you go back long enough, and some of this audience can relate, seat belts were a breakthrough. Airbags were a breakthrough. Anti-skid braking, traction control, different things, breakthroughs. You want to make cars safer, protect more lives today? More technology, lane-changing prevention, detection using radar, forward collision, backup collision, avoidance using radar and technology. These are all things that make a safer and better society overall. And then maybe, and it's the one that's most dramatic because it impacts everybody in this room, is the impact that technology can have on healthcare. Think about the miniaturization of imaging to where you can literally have an ultrasound in your hand for first responders. Think about what could happen in terms of implanted medical devices over time. Think of what can happen in terms of telemedicine and the ability to deliver better healthcare, cheaper healthcare, less invasive healthcare. Technology will be at the heart of what solves those problems. Now, the second reason that I believe we're in such a great time to be in the innovation business is, as amazing as the past century has been, it has probably only involved about 2 billion people from the planet. Western Europe, US, a couple of select economies in Asia. Next century, probably going to be 5 pushing 6 billion people involved in the growth of this planet. So not only are the opportunities of great solutions in front of us, but the ability to now impact literally the entire planet. To give perspective on that, the telephone, invented back somewhere in the 1870s, the telephone, remember the one that was hooked to your wall, that had a wire to it? Our kids don't remember what that looks like. I think it got to around the world, 1.2 billion telephones were installed back at the peak before wireless LAN and broadband started taking phone line counts down. Today, there's over 4.5, approaching 5 billion cell phone users. Okay, 4 times the number that we ever got to with wireline communications. That's the type of impact that we can have when the entire planet can participate in innovation and technology. So I think it's a great time in front of us, and I think it is a time that innovators will be rewarded. Chips are at the heart of the innovation. We're biased, we're in the chip business. We are also fortunate, as is the state of Texas, that we had Jack Kilby with extra vacation time on his hands in the summer of 1958, when he was told to stay behind because he didn't have vacation. And in his lab notebook that summer, he sketched out what became literally the first integrated circuit. David talked about, we recently opened Kilby Labs in his honor at the 50th anniversary of that invention. And it is about people that just look at the world differently, probably defy the common sense or the ways that the world was trying to solve the problem at that time, and they press on with their passion and try to solve that problem in a unique way. Fact is, I think the IC has been the most important invention in our lifetime. Just look at what you do on a daily basis. Get in the car, how many times you touch integrated circuits, communications, entertainment, the information that you process and access. None of that takes place without the invention of the integrated circuit. We have a lot to thank if you look back in times at federal level investment in research and development, be it early investment by the AT&Ts and Bell Labs that were essentially monopoly invested and protected by the government, investments made into communications back 100 years ago, great investment made, be it defense, be it the space program back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And out of that, we were fortunate as a country to have the integrated circuit business, or the chip business, basically started in the US. And we're fortunate that today, 50% of the market, and it's probably a $300 billion market in chips, companies that are headquartered in the US have 50% share because of those inventions. We are also fortunate because the IC was headquartered here. We saw businesses like Compaq, like Dell, which led to things like the internet, think Cisco, which led to things like Google, things like Apple. Think of the innovation and the economic growth that we have because of federal level research, basic research investment that was made literally tens of years ago, and the economic vitality that we enjoy as a country today. Fact is, over the past 5 years, the semiconductor industry, this always surprises people, semiconductor industry, #1 exporter from the United States. More than planes, trains, you pick the economy. Chips, largest export product for the US. Technology is the largest exported product out of the state of Texas. It's larger than oil. That's the opportunity that we have in front of this group today. Now, as great as, call it the first 50 years of the chip business has been, as a number of the folks in this room know, the wonderful process of scaling or shrinking or making chips smaller, we're starting to count atoms. We're starting to stack literally 1 and 2 atoms on top of one another to have the right behavior of our fundamental switches and our fundamental storage mechanisms, which says there is going to be some pretty important changes over probably the next 10 years. And I think of that generally as breakthroughs in nanotechnology. A lot of different work that's going on that particular front. I think the challenge that we have as a group of people gathered here today is that when large markets or large industries have transitions in basic technology, okay, it's an opportunity for leadership change to take place. So we are either going to be the group inventing the breakthroughs in nanotechnology, or someone in China or somewhere else in the world is going to be doing it. It's really that simple. It's a competitive game. We've got to win at it. And I appreciate that we have the help of a lot of folks in this room to be able to try to win and be successful. Okay, lastly, prosperity. If you believe that prosperity requires innovation, and that innovation in turn requires action, and that action really breaks down to two things. We need increased investment in basic research, think of R&D, and we need to make sure we have literally the greatest minds playing on our teams working on these problems. So a couple of things. First, federal level. We need to follow through on the statements made to double investment via NSF, be it DOE, different work that's taking place also through through NIST, to double basic research investment on a U.S. basis. We also need to have tax policy at a federal level that encourages R&D. All the obvious reasons, but despite obviousness of the reasons, the R&D tax credit ends up as an annual or a biannual debate for good sport in the city of Washington. It's just not very effective, maybe good entertainment. At the state level, I made a lot of great compliments and comments about why I am glad we are headquartered in the state of Texas. But we need to remember that it is not some geographic benefit of being south of the Red River that gives us the opportunity we have in this room. It is because we have an environment that encourages growth, entrepreneurism, and the types of things that we have a lot of companies and universities that have benefited from. We today in Texas are third in the U.S. in terms of research grants from the federal government. And I know this is very close to Senator Hutchison's heart. California, Massachusetts, number 1 and 2. I've spent a lot of time. There's some great universities and great institutions in California and Massachusetts. I can also assure everybody in this room, they are very happy with that ranking. And if you give them their vote, they'd like it to stay that way. What this room needs to decide is that Texas is going to become number 1 in terms of reception of federal investment. Second thing, Texas legislature. I think that season opens soon. We have got to make wise decisions down here. And it begins with things like the Emerging Tech Fund as well as the Tier 1 Fund. Innovation doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you create an environment that lets innovators go do their job and then leaves them alone to go get that work done. At the education level, this whole business is about great minds, and it's really quite simple. And that is, we have got to have a K-12 system, especially on science and math, that we can put great teachers in front of great kids that bring the world of math and science alive. It's a challenge we have in front of us. We need to start in our own backyard, be it our city, be it our state. We have got to invest if we're going to be successful from a STEM perspective to be able to be the innovating leaders 100 years from now. Now, I talk about R&D and I talk about education, and you do not have to go very far in the headlines today to hear about the recession, to hear about the budgetary issues, to hear about the fact, my gosh, this is all going to be very difficult in a tough economy. And the thing that I want to encourage the leaders in this room, and make sure the leaders in this room are talking to your representatives, okay, that you know, is that recessions are opportunities to permanently extend your competitive advantage. Instead of sitting here bemoaning, oh my gosh, we got a budget deficit, oh my gosh, look how hard the world is, take a look at California if you want to be cheered up. And I don't say that to poke fun at California. I say that to look at the problem differently. Okay, we have a unique opportunity in the state of Texas to attract and recruit the greatest researchers throughout the U.S. today, because some of these states like California have significant problems. What it's going to take, though, is it's going to take a commitment by the leaders of universities or state legislators, I'll get to federal in a minute, to say, we're going to make tough decisions in areas and protect investment in basic research, because it singularly has the biggest influence in our long-term competitiveness. Those are easy words. It is hard to do. And I know that because in the semiconductor industry, we get to test this every 2 or 3 years. And it's not an easy thing, but when you make those investments in the downturns, you end up enjoying the benefits for many years to come, and you can't get that advantage any other way. Federal government has got the same challenges, and it is refreshing to see that the President's deficit panel that came back, even in that first pass that they proposed, they said there's many things that have to be done to get the budgetary crisis under control, and it does need to be gotten under control, but we need to protect investments in basic research, and we need to protect investments in education in the process of doing that. And I think if we can abide by those guidelines, it'll be very important for us. Folks, it has been, as I said, truly a pleasure to be here today, to spend some time with such an esteemed group that's having such an impact on the innovation throughout the state of Texas and really throughout the world. It's humbling to be with such people of such impact in terms of where we are. I know that we have a common passion towards innovation. I just looked at the panels, the meetings, the different things that are taking place today and tomorrow. It's fascinating stuff. Let's make sure that we're translating that common passion to a singular common action, and that is to grow the investment in basic research in the state of Texas. Let's put the goal out. Let's become #1 in terms of federal research grants received. Let's come back to this meeting 10 years from now and have achieved that and be talking about the next decade of innovation that this group of leaders is going to be working on. Again, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity today.
Well, thank you, Rich. That was so thoughtful and so clear and so straightforward. And when you digest it, so obvious. Thank you for giving us that message from your mouth, from your lips to God's ear. I mean that metaphorically, from your lips to the ears of the policymakers, in government, on campuses, to everyone in this room. That was a powerful and thoughtful and clear and well-delivered message. Let's thank Rich one more time. Well, again, thank you for being here at lunch. The next session is at 2 o'clock on energy back in the main meeting room. Thank you.